Okay, we're back, we're live, we're here. It's Thursday. This is Global Connections, and I'm Jay Fidell. I'm not Carlos Juarez. I'm Jay Fidell. That's Carlos Juarez. Because what we're doing today is I'm going to be the host and he's going to be the guest, because we have an abiding need to talk about globalism in higher education. And that's what we're going to do. Carlos is an expert in that area, so that's why we switched roles. And so this is Global Connections. It's Thursday, part of the ThinkTech series. Welcome aboard. Okay, so Carlos, welcome to the show in your role as guest. Yeah. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, Jay. Delighted, and I'm really, I'm humbled actually to join you here, and look forward to a great conversation.
Well, your show, Global Connections, has the all-time record of any show on the ThinkTech series. You and Patrick Bratton talked about the Indian elections, maybe made some prognostications about a month ago or so. And that went viral around the world, and we had an enormous number of hits, thousands and thousands of hits, still going strong too.
Well, it just underscores the world that we're in. It's coming smaller and closer and more connected than ever.
And that's the point of the show.
Yeah.
Let me just say that Carlos is a professor of political science at HPU, Hawaii Pacific University, where he specializes in international relations and comparative politics. Wow. His regional expertise is primarily in Latin America and in Central and Eastern Europe. And why not other places too?
Yeah, but you have to pick two. I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Fair enough. He received his PhD from UCLA, a very good school. He's been a Fulbright Scholar to Mexico and the Czech Republic. He's just been awarded another Fulbright grant to be a visiting professor next spring in Innsbruck, Austria. Wow, what a life. So please join me in welcoming Carlos Juarez. All right.
Hey, thank you. No, I'm really honored, and for me, I think it's a great opportunity to just really underscore the work that you've done over the years now to bring this together. We have a fantastic array of programs, and Global Connections is just one piece of a big pie that really helps inform our communities.
Yes, wonderful to hear you say that, because you're a big part of it, and it's going somewhere for sure. It's becoming. It's on the wave. That's what it is. Anyway, so higher education, higher education somehow comes into play more now that David Lasner has found his job.
That's right.
And because as he expresses his vision for the future of UH, which is, it's vision. I mean, we haven't had a vision quite like that before.
Yeah.
And maybe he'll be able to achieve some of those things, and maybe we'll have a denouement in higher education in Hawaii. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
So it makes us think about that, and it makes us realize, as he said in his early statements on this week, that it is an international experience. Education is international.
Yeah.
And indeed, all the people we interview from UH and HPU, make it clear that their activities are international. Their data gathering, their professional collaborations, it's all international. And you are a perfect example of that. So it's been said that in education, and in recent years really, has become a global enterprise.
Yeah.
What do we mean by that, Carlos?
Yeah. Well, it's a fair point. I mean, we all understand this notion. Well, we have different ideas of what globalization means, but typically we associate it with the movement of goods and services, products, trade, and even people on some level. But in effect, you have to see that education itself has become more of a global enterprise in that sense. And I think it takes various forms. On one hand, it requires us to think carefully about how do we prepare the future generation for the world that we're seeing happen, the globalized world that we're part of. But also, more than that, it also means that universities in particular, higher education, are increasingly building connections and links and fostering a form of global learning. It's not just learn a course or a curriculum of some sort, but it's really mobility of students, mobility of faculty that cross borders, bringing and hosting visitors and the like. So it takes on various forms. And what I've done, I had a recent contribution to a book this past year on global learning in higher education, and it just speaks to the fact that it's not enough to just have a course here, a language there. Those are essential. We do need those. We've always had them. But today our leaders in the universities, much like in the business and other areas, have to think more strategically and think of ways that we can more embed or institutionalize internationalization. That's kind of what I'm trying to get a better handle on. How do we do that? It's not enough to have a vision. You need that, and you've described the new UH president. I mean, you need to have that beginning from the top. But there's a lot more than that. You need to also empower the what I would call sort of academic entrepreneurs, those that are actually going to make things happen. And then you have to harness not just your own students and what they have opportunities to do, study abroad namely, but also bringing in international students. Again, all over the world, whether it's Asia, Europe, Africa, Latin America, there's a greater mobility these days of young populations, and that goes a long way to help kind of foster this global learning.
Is it an option for a university these days, or is it a requirement?
Yeah, well, I guess you'd have to say what kind of university. There may be some that are very narrowly focused, or, maybe a professional school that's just training, I don't know. But, nevertheless, I could even tell you a nursing program that, you might think, well, you're just training nurses. But guess what? The people those nurses are working on are increasingly global immigrant communities. You have to understand culture. Not only that, but we have, just like with HBU has growing links with, nursing programs in Vietnam or China or the Philippines. So we're doing a lot more across borders. Is it an option? I mean, I guess I would say on one level, because of this growing globalization, you've got to be connected in some way globally. It really is hard to imagine. It would have to be such a narrowly focused. Maybe I'm thinking like a school of optometry or something that maybe can just have a very narrow focus. Any traditional university, liberal arts college has to be more globally connected.
Well, what are the stakes? I mean, for example, you hear about some schools that can't hack it.
Yeah.
Economically, they can't bring the students in. They have to go advertise. They have all kinds of revenue issues. I mean, even to some extent, UH.
That's right.
And unless they cover those revenue issues, they're going to be out of business. And you say a global enterprise, you also mean global business.
Oh, of course. And no, absolutely. And if you're a public institution, let's say like the UH system, the residents of Hawaii will pay essentially a subsidized rate. You have out-of-state and international students coming, they're going to be paying and helping to subsidize some of that. And at the end of the day, I mean, I come from a private institution. We do depend a lot on that external market, and it helps internationalize, it helps subsidize or fund what we do. So it is definitely a business, and you have to understand that. You can't run a university if you don't have budgets that are going to make things happen.
So if I'm the president, I want this.
Well, you do, and yet you have to be careful because it's also, you have to be very clear about what you want, and it's not enough to just say, I want international students. Well, what does that mean? Because it also presents challenges, having to bring in students, are their English skills sufficient? Are there cultural challenges of adapting to them? We've brought in students from all over the world, as you well know, at HBU, and if you have students coming from cultures in the Middle East or from other parts of Asia, you have to understand what their needs might be and address those.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Just a free-form discussion, but a week ago I was in the Big Island. I went to Kealakehe High School.
I was at last year's high school graduation for them.
And this year, who came? Somebody very important came. I want to say somebody important went over there to speak.
Yes.
And what is really interesting about that school is that it's multiglot.
Yes,
may I say.
yes.
And the big issue is the various cultures contending.
Yeah.
And at one point, the principal, whose name is Murakami, Wilfred Murakami, he told me, and I have this on film. In fact, it was part of our OC16 show, that they had to shut the school down because the kids really hadn't gotten through the barrier of how to deal with diversity.
Yes,
and they were mad at each other, and they had emotional
a lot of tensions, even there
tension.
Different groups, right? Because here again, it's by chance I happen to have gone to that high school and to a graduation ceremony, and the diversity reflects, again, large immigrant populations that are there from all over, from Latin America, from all throughout Asia, Polynesia as well, the South Pacific. And it's true, they have tensions that have flared up, and so it requires them to take stock and figure out how do we manage this diverse population of students here alone.
Yeah, it becomes a laboratory. I remember, by the way, who went there. The Supreme Court went there. The state Supreme Court went there and actually
like
conducted
a
hearing.
traveling hearing, of course.
And those kids were so wide-eyed, a great treat.
Yeah.
But point is, though, that the diversity is often a challenge. You have to get through it. You have to develop systems. And I really wonder, for example, about HBU, or any school like HBU, because you have various cultures that may not necessarily get along that well. They may have, back home, they may have cultural propensities or hostilities toward other cultures. And you have to find ways to bring them together, just as in Kealakehe High School.
That's right. And this is true, again, throughout our country. You have places where maybe 30, 50 years ago, it was a very homogeneous student body that was at the university. Today, more first-generation students, more children of immigrants, and more places where, again, 30 years ago, you didn't have immigrant groups. Now you've got populations in whether it's the Midwest or any part of the country. They have to deal now with an international student population, second language learners and the like. And part of that is also understanding where they come from, understanding their culture, their values, and how do we how do we manage that? It's not easy.
It's huge, though.
Yes.
Because, take that high school, or take HPU, or anybody which is conscious of this issue, and bring those kids together. It's not temporary. It's for life. And it's for lives and other lives and being. I mean, it'll cast a long shadow. Everyone is touched by it, and it brings the world together. We're involved right now in education, I think, a transformational process. Only in the last few years.
Absolutely, and not only you might have on one extreme tensions that will flare up and conflict, and that can play out also in the global arena in different ways, in business or in armed violence. But the other point would be, if you can figure out and make it work at the school level, you're developing competencies. Students that learn how to work with other cultures, they learn empathy, they learn culture and diversity, they learn how to negotiate things better. They will be better positioned to be in the workforce, because the workforce is certainly changing just as well.
And it goes the other direction too. In HPU, you have a student who was here last week, joined the Foreign Service.
Patrick Bronco.
Patrick Bronco.
That's right.
He went to South America, and HPU is making a contribution of a local kid, much less
local Kamehameha grad,
to the international world.
And I mean, he brings us, he's a smart kid, so that part of it is there. He's nurtured, he's got families that have helped him, but at the end of the day, his experience here in a diverse population helped him refine what are now diplomatic skills that he's using. And to me, that is a clear example where anybody going to the university now has got to, gain from that.
When I went to school, even in grade school, I lived in sort of a UN bedroom community in Queens, New York.
So pretty diverse at that time.
It was diverse at that time, but nothing like it is now. And it was not. It was accepted, of course, but it wasn't integrated to the same degree as what we have now. And it strikes me that the most significant thrust on that has been the Chinese. Because they've come to America, they've come everywhere, really, in Europe as well, and they have taken the place by storm academically. In fact, schools develop programs for them. All the lawyers, for example, all take an LLM, and they make it part of their career, path to take an LLM. And the Chinese learn all about those cultures. They learn all about business, all about law. And they take that home as a huge asset.
Yes.
We don't do enough of it, but I think we could learn from them because they see this so clearly.
And it's something that, education is valued so highly. I mean, in particular, a lot of the Asian cultures, that it's embedded from the start. You're going to work, you're going to do this, and it does take a lot of that nurturing from a very young age.
So there are organizations, there are nonprofits all around the world. When I was in college, there was something called AISEC, AISEC, in French, that's Association Internationale Société Économique Commerciale, I think it was. And it was for business kids. And they would put you in a job, an intern job, but it would be very far away. I imagine I have a couple of godchildren who have done this for their third year in college, and those organizations have multiplied. They're everywhere. You get so many opportunities.
Absolutely.
To do this.
No, and this is so critical for those who do, particularly for higher education. You need this type of what we call experiential learning. It's out of the classroom, it's practical, and it could be anything from business, like you described. It could be community service oriented. It could be different nonprofits. This is very critical, and I can tell you, as I've been a college professor now about 25 years, the students who get engaged and follow those things, do those, they are just so much better positioned to kind of make the next step. They've been in organizations, they know what it involves. You've got to get out of the classroom. You need some of that classroom for the dynamics and the discussion and the readings, but these type of sort of extern internships and external links are so vital.
So what's the role of a school like HPU or UH for that matter terms of developing an awareness among its students
Yes.
and of sending them for temporary or even permanent changes.
Well, it's always fascinating to me because this is a time when you go to the college. I'm particularly talking about the undergraduate education experience, because graduate takes on a different format, or professional schools, but the undergraduate experience is such an important part of one's early life. You're making choices for the first time, but I put it this way. I think one of the roles is to kind of, in some level, get young adults out of their comfort zone, get them into sort of looking at different things from different angles, and that's what we try to inculcate. Critical thinking, not to be critical of everything, but to see that there are different ways of looking at it. And you don't have to agree with all of them, but you have to understand it. Get out of your comfort zone, get exposed to new ideas, try something different. And I'm myself a strong proponent of a more liberal education in the sense of broad and wide-ranging. Now, that's not for everybody. Some people who may know what they want to be, an engineer or some focused thing, that's one thing. But even there, I think you ultimately want a broad education that exposes people. You want to develop values like empathy, understanding, open-mindedness. Some would say those are the hallmarks of a liberal education.
And they're the hallmarks of peace, not war.
Yes, absolutely. And again, it's getting out of your comfort zone, because guess what? The world is out there, and you may see it black and white, but guess what? It's got shades of gray and purple, and you've got to see that it's not all that black and white, and the university experience does that for you on some level. And again, it varies for people, and there are different types of schools, very big, comprehensive ones, small, liberal art types. They'll each have their own set of, cultures.
Okay, I want to compare what you've said with science, with how this works at the scientific university level right after this break. This is Carlos Juarez. He's a professor of many years at HPU. He's a traveler. He likes traveling for sure. And he's good at talking about globalization and education. I'm Jay Fidell. This is Global Connections. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Amashta, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m.
Okay, we're back. We're live. It's Thursday. Guess what? And it's Global Connections Day. And Carlos Juarez is ordinarily the host of Global Connections. Now he's here as a guest of mine, Jay Fidell. He's a professor of political science at HBU. He specializes in international relations and comparative politics. His expertise is in Latin America, Central and Eastern Europe. And he has his PhD from UCLA, been a Fulbright Scholar in Mexico and the Czech Republic, just awarded another Fulbright grant to visit Innsbruck, Austria next year.
Yes, that's right, in the
different.
spring. Yeah, not to be confused with Australia. They always get that.
That's the one after.
Yeah.
So, Carlos, I have become aware, and I'm sure you know too, because HPU has a scientific streak in it. With the Oceanic Institute and all that.
That's right.
Which involves research in science. And research in science has changed in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
It's quite remarkable now that nobody does anything just at home.
Yeah.
You have to reach out. It's not an option in science. You have to join the scientific community, and it's not just internet. It's the whole thing. You got to go travel. They got to come and see you. You got to go to conferences together and so forth. So it seems to me, though, that there's a difference between the social sciences, which you've been talking about, and the sciences. Care to talk about that?
Well, of course, and when you say science, it is what we might call the more traditional hard sciences.
Hard science.
The sort of physics, math, biology.
It's science to everything,
life
really.
sciences. Yeah. But my world, I could often joke that I'm a social scientist. It's really what we might call a softer one. We pretend to be scientists, but in some level, we're not quite. We really are more analysts of social, cultural issues. We don't have the predictive power often that you find. Maybe science can be very clearly defined, and you mix this and that, and you get that, not quite. The social sciences that I'm more part of often are housed with the humanities, which is another area. But what we identify as the social sciences, traditionally they're anthropology, geography, political science, sociology, psychology. These are sort of the traditional ones. And of course, I will say that some of them are increasingly more scientific. I mean, even my disciplinary political science, there's a lot of rigor given to voting behavior and statistical analysis. But at the end of the day, we're talking about human interactions, and things are not always as they seem.
More an art than a science.
Yes, yes. And we often assume, especially economics, of course, that's another of the critical social sciences, probably the most scientific. They assume rationality, and there's a lot of behavior you can predict. People, do respond in certain ways. Prices go up, they buy less. Prices go down, you put something free, people go nuts. But it doesn't always happen. There's always some little outliers and puzzles. Indeed, I began my own career initially in economics and did a lot in both high school and math.
That's not a science.
Eventually,
no one can ever say that's a science.
No, but they're certainly the more scientific of them.
True.
They've got data, they know how to analyze it
right.
and present it. But to me, the puzzles were always like, what about this? Or, things that didn't quite fit into that model. And that's where I kind of found myself veering a little bit out. But on some level, I'm actually a political economist. I do look at the nexus, the interaction of politics and economics, because they do go hand in hand. But we will always suffer from perhaps a more limited ability than the hard scientists have in somehow certain things. But look, the sciences themselves, ultimately, if you're a scientist, you have to understand something about politics and policy, about government, about choices that we make, and so
you need to.
You need to, absolutely.
We need you to do that.
Yeah, and likewise, our political decision makers need to know something about science. You hear a lot of debates out there, the so-called, whether they're climate change deniers or people who kind of maybe interpret science in ways that aren't always fully accepted. So there's always got to be a bit of both of that. And this is where I would say the same I said earlier about a liberal education. A scientist also needs to be grounded in some understanding of the humanities, the arts, the sort of social, cultural things. You don't work in a world that is not affected by that.
There was a very interesting story on HPR a couple of weeks ago about the quality of scientific knowledge in Congress. And they had a staffer there.
Steadily declining.
Exactly. They had a staffer there who was, an insider and who was totally candid about it.
Yeah.
She said, what happens is that nobody in office knows anything about science.
Yeah.
So then they have to rely on people who come to see them.
Yeah.
And who comes to see them is two kinds of people. One is the scientists who don't know how to present their case.
That's right.
And the other is the lobbyists who are not scientists, but they know how to present
That's
the case.
right. And there's a mismatch
And
there.
the lobbyists always win.
They've got the money.
And that's why Congress always makes mistakes.
That's right. No, it's a fair point, and it is so true. Again, I think it underscores how, if you are a scientist, and you're working in a scientific organization, somebody's got to understand, the finances, the policy, et cetera. And likewise, if you're a political figure making decisions about scientists, you may not know it, but you better have some reliable expertise that you know how to turn to.
So these guys have resumes that, talk about their papers, for example, and every paper has collaborators. I'm sure it's the same with your CV. Every collaborators all over the world. And they're involved in a given project where they're doing big data, and although it may be processed here, it comes from everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, their job is to verify that it's reasonably good data.
Yeah.
But when they put it together and make their modeling and all that, that data could come from anywhere in the world.
Oh, absolutely.
And so it becomes, as you said, a global enterprise.
Yeah. No, it is. And the technologies over these particularly the last 30 years, or pretty soon we'll be saying 40 years, but certainly the last generation have made those connections so vital, so that now, and especially if you're in the science world, I mean, you may be communicating with somebody in Poland and in Japan and Uruguay, and you've got collaboration that happens across communities. And we often speak of these as virtual communities. They may not even see each other, but they are connected and sharing. They do come together increasingly in conferences and things like that. But it is astonishing how the technologies have helped to facilitate that. And in the old days, everyone toiled away in their independent world, and maybe over time they would connect or read what somebody else put out. But now this is done instantly.
Who pays? You know what I mean? I mean, we have, for example, a floor manager here, a young fellow just graduated high school, looking at a career in science.
Yeah.
And he's listening to you, and you're talking about going hither and yon and making a career of hopscotching the world. I mean,
Yeah.
you already have.
Yeah.
Who pays for that? I mean, if he thinks that he's going to have to get his checkbook out, and sort of cover that as another educational
Yeah,
expense,
yeah.
that's trouble.
It
But if he
is,
thinks that there's somebody out there who's going to take care of him and send him to Innsbruck, for example, then maybe it's a little better, more exciting for him.
It is, and I certainly encourage all my students. You've got to be resourceful. Things don't always come to you. For a few people that happens, but it's rare. Most people, you've got to get out there and be entrepreneurial on some level. Dig deeper, be inquisitive, and that's certainly an important trait or skill that you need. I mean, to get ahead in anything. Ask questions and dig, and the information is out there, and we have a world where there's a lot of scholarship money out there, and there's just a small percentage of people who are figuring that out and how to harness that. But I would go back to just the idea of the scientists. Yeah, I mean, we need them, and there are people prepared to pay for supporting that. It's a finite amount like everything, but it's there, and if you are savvy and persistent, you can find ways to do that.
Well, that goes back to your term enterprise, which
Yeah.
I take as a business.
Yeah.
Because if I'm in something and in a given field, in HPU or UH or any college in the country, if I want to make my bones, I have to get out and about.
Yeah.
And in order to get out and about, I have to write grant applications.
Yeah.
I have to, stay in touch with colleagues. I have to find out what's going on. I have to find ways to get there.
That's
and
right.
this is a business matter. If I
Yeah.
don't do that, what do they say? Travel or perish.
That's right. Very well put. Yeah. But you touch on a lot of things. I mean, so if you're a scientist, guess what? You better be a good grant writer, and you better be a good communicator and a writer. I mean, these are skills that are going to be essential. You've got to be able to communicate your ideas. People are only going to fund you if you can tell them what you want. If you can't write coherently, good luck.
You got to sell it.
So you got to become an effective writer, communicator. You've got to be a researcher to know where to go and who to ask. And ultimately, you may not have all the answers, but if you know where to dig and who to talk to, and it's that networking ultimately. How many people get their jobs from the classifieds ads in the newspaper? I mean, Craigslist has job ads, but most jobs are not going to be found there. It's the whole process of asking, talking, networking. That's how it works.
Business challenges.
Yeah.
Personal tests.
Yeah.
It's like you need a business consultant, but you are your own business consultant.
Yeah.
And so the faculty comes into play here.
Yeah.
Somebody comes to you and says, Carlos, I want to rule the world. Where do I start? You're going to be able to help him. You can tell him how to do it.
You can open a few things here and there, but again, we need all kinds of people. And you certainly need entrepreneurs. You need people who are risk takers, but you need people who obviously can help manage those things. And not all of us have all those skill sets. I mean, mind you, certain people may be better at this or that. This is where I also would underscore the importance of teamwork and collaboration. I mean, maybe you're not the one that's up front, but you could be behind the scenes helping to write a grant or
Sure.
something like that. Someone else may be able to then deliver the sales pitch or something. Our students, the kind of learning we know they need, it's not that individual rote memorization. You might need that for certain things, but ultimately what you need are teamwork and group activities, and those are that's what people do in the real world. You've got to solve problems with a group of others.
And the group can be very diverse.
Yes,
They're
yes,
not going to be
yes.
like fellows.
Yeah.
They're going to be very diverse.
And this speaks to the need to understand diversity and sort of the global nature of education, that ultimately the workplace is global, and you need to be able to understand how someone else may see the world differently from you. They may bring a different set of values into the decision making.
Go out of the box. You need
Yeah.
that. So Alex Filipenko, who's an astrophysicist, he was voted the best, most popular professor in UC Berkeley for 9 years in a row. Very,
Pretty-
friendly fellow, I guess.
Yeah.
He's charismatic. Gave a speech 3 weeks ago at UH, and I was there. And at the end of the speech, he asked for Q&A. And remarkable now, the Friends of Astronomy were there, Friends of the IFA were there, and they all came up, and now the speech is over, and they're asking Q&A, and these kids came up. And these kids were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. There was one 12. He seemed old in the crowd. And they had these really sophisticated questions about astrophysics.
Oh, my
They're very
goodness.
impressive.
Yeah.
And he said to one of them, he said, that's a great idea. Nobody has investigated that. We'll write a paper, you and me. But I want first position on the paper. And you say to
That's
yourself,
fantastic.
is he really kidding? Or could it be that he would take some young person
Yeah.
who just had a special talent
yeah.
from anywhere in the world and bring him in on this paper he would write?
Yeah. Well, I think what it speaks to me, because I teach many different levels, young undergraduates, more, older, mature, graduate students. And it is important to have often the very young mind that looks at things so simply. We talk about things like war and peace, or like the Korean War conflict, and you're talking to somebody who's lived through it. It's very different from a 20-year-old who says, wait a minute, this seems so simple. I mean, what's going on? So that fresh 7-year-old probably had a light bulb go off, and it's an idea that
Exactly.
could easily be, and then this savvy professor, has the ability to kind of shape it, gets first name on the link, but he's helping this young guy take his idea into something else.
And when he says to him, I'll write a paper with you,
Mm-hmm.
so maybe it's not completely serious, but when that kid goes home that night,
He's
his life
inspired.
is different, right? He's
Yes.
inspired.
Oh my gosh.
What do they say? It takes one professor,
Yeah.
to change your life, to make you feel confident where you wouldn't otherwise.
Yes.
Does this happen? Is this
It
happening?
does. It does, and it's often at a micro level. But I come from a world. I mean, I'm fortunate. Because of the nature of what I do, I have the option to travel quite often. But in general, we don't get into this enterprise because it's a huge cash cow. I mean, if I wanted to make money, I guess business would offer more. But what we get are the rewards of working with people that you can see or having an impact on somebody's life. For us, again, the academic, it is often mentoring and seeing somebody. Patrick Bronco, I had him as a student, at 19 or 20. Now he's a diplomat in his mid-20s, suddenly changing the world, making policy decisions, and that's what you
Psychic benefit for you.
And it's a different kind of payoff, but it does kind of give you that renewed energy. And the other part I always like to say about the academic enterprise is that no matter what, the classes always end, the semester's over, you have a fresh one, you have new people, there's always like a recycling of new ideas. The young, 7-year-old, maybe now 17.
I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
not only for you, but objectively, what is the dynamic? Right after this break.
Yeah.
That's Carlos Juarez. We're learning things we never knew or imagined here today about globalization and higher education. We'll be right back after this short break. I'm Jay Fidell. That's Sharon Moriwaki of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. And every Wednesday we have Hawaii, the state of clean energy. We've been doing it for some time now, and we have some fantastic guests on there, unbelievable guests who give us insight into what is going on in a very complex, sometimes very confusing, sometimes very disappointing area of progress in the state. So we love doing this. We love meeting them. We love talking to them. We love having their ideas out on the table. So maybe, just maybe, we can all make some sense of what's going on. Sharon, what do you think?
I think that's absolutely correct. We enjoy ourselves meeting with all these people and hearing about the energy and the state of clean energy, and hopefully we advance clean energy for the state. So it's terrific. Join us. Come
Okay,
join
it's
us.
every Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday is Energy Day. Every
Energy
Wednesday,
Wednesday.
4 to 5 p.m. Hawaii, the state of clean energy, here on ThinkTech Hawaii.
Energy
we'll see you
Wednesday.
there. We are. We're back.
Jay.
We're live. ThinkTech, having a wonderful time with Carlos Juarez, who is normally the host, but today's special. We got to do this more often.
Guest.
He's the guest, and he's a cornucopia. I always knew that about you, Carlos. So we talked before about how one teacher can change your life, can encourage you to feel the kind of confidence that you need to dedicate yourself, to actually change your life direction as a student. But it works two ways. There are some students that you run into as a teacher who change your life, as a teacher.
Yeah. That's
And I'd like to know about that. I'd like to know the dynamic, the ebb and flow of it, the yin and yang of it as you go through the years in a long career in teaching. How do you deal with that, the need to repeat, but also the joy of finding new minds?
Yeah, and it is interesting because on one level, I teach a lot of the same things over and over. There's some basic foundation things, but you've got to also find ways to kind of give them either a new spin or a new look. The other challenge, I think, is the nature of the new generation of students now. The way they use technologies, the way they see the world, for that matter, is another challenge. But in terms of the dynamics, let's say, of the classroom and the sort of the way the learning takes place, I mean, this is just something that's constantly changing and challenging. I mentioned earlier how one of the exciting things is that there's always closure, there's always like a new chapter, there's always new, new minds, new ideas that are coming forward. And I guess, on one hand, I think to be an effective teacher, and I certainly don't have all the solutions here, but you certainly need to be adaptable to that, because I think the bigger challenge that I see that we've had a lot is the composition of students, more diverse, different type of learners, first generation college students, older adult learners that are coming back into the classroom, and each of these require a different. You have to, what I often like to do, again, you have to have different strategies. Not what works in a certain type of group may not in the other, but you have to find ways to kind of draw out and let, I like to say, give them sort of, put them in the driving seat, if you will. The old days of the traditional lecture, I mean, there's still a place for that, but it's more limited. Increasingly, the students aren't learning by that, and frankly, we have a dramatic revolution happening now in education. Some of the very best schools, Berkeley, Stanford, MIT, they're just putting on the video, their best lectures. And if you want a lecture there,
MOOCs, I was going to ask you about
these are
massive open online courses.
That's right, and I mean it is, there's mixed feelings about it. On one hand, it's there, it's a reality, but it's not replacing the other part that we need, which is really, group dynamics, people coming together. But my main point is that if you want a lecture, you can find plenty of good lectures. You can Google TED Talks, you can find any number of those. It is the other type of learning.
Have that around. You didn't have that available to you.
No, I mean, and so anybody who wants to find, some good speakers, it's there. If you have Netflix, you can download them if you're on just a Googler. But ultimately, you need this other type of learning that takes place in the give and take in a classroom setting. And, we have a world now where, any university now, you've got a mixture of what we might call hybrid learning. You do the classroom, but you also have some online components. Every classroom that we teach now has to have that. You've got a course web page where you might have access to information and documents and the like. And this is a challenge for some. I mean, we see it in as you would expect, in sort of older generations. Sometimes they're not as quick to embrace the new technologies. But if you're walking into a classroom today with 18, 19, 20-year-olds, I mean, they've grown up entirely on, the new technologies, and you've got to understand how they use them, how they think.
Are they more sophisticated or less? I mean, I thought when I went to college, a lot of my classmates were, and this is giving away my age, but giving away, rather, a lot of my classmates were Korean War veterans that just come out of the Army from the Korean War. And they were very good. They were very sophisticated. And they raised all boats in the classroom. And their age and experience made them better students.
Sure.
So what about now?
It really, I think it's hard to say any single answer to that. I mean, on one hand, we've got, young generation of students who are very savvy and know technical issues and are inquisitive. My concern comes more in that increasingly we have also young populations who don't read, who don't do research in a real way. And I mean, I often think back of, gosh, when I was a young, college student, just what it was like to go into a library without any, I mean, maybe just you're wasting time or you've got a writing block, but you just browse the shelves and you'd come across something that you would not have found otherwise.
Like a church, a library like a church.
And that is almost gone from us now. Libraries now are becoming just these virtual, little online things, and to me, I think we're losing something there. There are still places you can do that, and certainly any big major university. I mean, you've got, if you're at UCLA or at Harvard, I mean, you have libraries that are still, places you can do that. But increasingly, and both also a function of budgets and costs, and even more than that, I think it's the users. I mean, the young generation tend to, why would I go to a library? I mean, why can't I just, at a few clicks, or even increasingly just, saying something into a little smart machine. So there, I think we are losing something. Now, beyond that, it is also where we're at a point now where maybe people don't need to know everything; they just need to know where to get it or how to find it.
And so feel that way.
That becomes the other issue. Well, I don't know the answer, but guess what? I can find it for you. And I mean, I'm one of those. I've got a smartphone, and suddenly something pops up. Boom! I'm on it within seconds. I can have a background information that you would have not had, before that.
It strikes me, though, just in this four corners of this conversation, that although this generation may not be as thoughtful, maybe as contemplative as those who spent more time alone, in the quiet of their own
daydreaming,
thoughts, daydreaming. Years ago, without all these electronic interferences, fact is that the international aspect, the travel,
Yeah.
meeting with people you never, heard of,
So that's opened another.
that changes your
Experience,
way of
yeah,
thinking, and maybe
yeah.
in a way that makes you more thoughtful,
Yeah,
more contemplative, more understanding.
As long as you take your earplugs off. and what I like, because I do travel a lot international, and people are, oh, do you use your cell phone? And it's like, I will, when I get access to some Wi-Fi. But what I also like is turning it off and not being, so plugged in, because it really, then your eyes open up to see the world. And yet, too often, I mean, certainly in day-to-day affairs, I mean, I've got 4 boys myself, and you even go to a restaurant, everybody's tuned out or listening or watching their little latest thing. You've got to turn that off from time to time, and travel allows you to do that. It forces you.
Yeah, and travel is part of the new educational process. So maybe it's a good thing. It's almost delicious.
Get away
when you get
from
into
your
college,
comfort. Yeah.
and you look down the field and you see all these wonderful things going to open up for you, and that kind of creates a problem for me, because I know a lot of people saying, go to trade school, go to community college and stop there, learn a very narrow, useful occupational, skill.
Yeah.
Stop there. And the old argument was, well, no, you have to expand your horizons and go to college and study metaphysics and all that. There are people, in fact, who sat in this very chair, Carlos, who oppose that completely and say, no, just do what you have to do, and don't run up $200,000 of student debt, and you'll be happier in the long term. That's more profitable. Which or what combination do you like?
Gosh, my initial thought was to say, well, different folks, are going to be interested in different things. Not everybody's going to be a sort of a uber scientist. And yes, I want to have a car mechanic who knows his trade and is going to fix it. But at the end of the day, too, I mean, look, to be a well-rounded person, an educated person, a citizen, not like we're all going to have PhDs, that's unrealistic, but you do want to have some sense of an understanding of what it means to be a human being, of where we've come from. So that trade school's great, but guess what? Go see an art movie or something, or learn something about the world. Go travel, because that will open your mind in a tremendous way.
And how to make public policy, how to vote for elected officials, how to think about the issues they think about, and effectively have an effect on legislation, have an effect on regulation, have an effect on the way the government works. And if you only have a trade and you don't think the larger issues, you'll never be a citizen in that sense.
And I mean, what I like to, because I'm a political scientist, and that can sometimes scare away people. Oh my gosh, politics, government, and but guess what? Whether you're a banker, a lawyer, an engineer, a mechanic, somebody's making choices that are affecting you. Somebody's making laws that are affecting you, and you better be aware and plugged in, because if not, then you better not complain, because those choices are going to be made for you.
Well, I want to know a couple of things in the remaining few minutes, Carlos. One is, you're a, what do they call it, first-generation college student, and you had to make some choices back when. You may not have had all the support you wanted. You may not have had all the, the swell from your family that you wanted to get. And how did your thought process change from then till now, when you see the whole thing as a global experience, and you are making it come true as a global experience, which is very enviable?
I mean, this is where I think back and reflect on my own upbringing, because I was the youngest in my family of 3 children, the first to go to college. Neither parent had gone to college. So when they sent me off, literally at 17, they put me on a plane and said goodbye. I couldn't, and in those days you didn't have cell phones. I mean, and as it happens, my parents were in Mexico City. I had gone to a British school there because I'd lived in the U.S. and in Europe. But literally, I think just kind of dumping me off and sending me off, I had to figure things out on my own, and I couldn't turn to them. I couldn't say, hey, I'm thinking of my schedule next semester, what should I take? But just that they weren't going to be there for that. So for me, it was eventually both being, more independent, but ultimately, and what continued in my graduate studies was finding mentors, people who could actually kind of inspire me and give me, some encouragement. I very much, I think that is so critical along anybody's way. Somebody who's going to kind of take you under their wing, or just kind of give you a little bit of hope that you've got potential. And I think I take that role myself very seriously when I work with students. Just giving them encouragement. It's a learning process, and I've had to learn that way along the way.
It's a confidence thing.
Yeah, and it takes time. I mean, I see it in some of my own children now. There's a mixture. Some are more confident than others. But guess what? I look when I was 17 or 18, and I didn't know where I would be or what I'd be doing. You just have to trudge along, and you need life experiences, and those things will teach you along the way.
Isn't it wonderful to have a world and a country in which we can have life experiences and essentially call the shots on our own lives and careers? I mean, we may not make the right decisions, but we can at least call the shots. So, you talk about your kids. Are they all going to go to college?
They are. My oldest is already in college up in Oregon. He's at Willamette University, a small liberal arts school, a second year. Politics and environmental science. So he's got a more practical, side of sorts, and very passionate about it, which I like. I mean, to me, it's like whatever you're into, it could be science, whatever. As long as you've got a passion, that's gonna be critical. So he's. I have two others that are on their way this fall. I have actually a stepson. I have a blended family, and my other younger son is off this fall to California. He'll be studying at the University of Redlands, another small liberal arts college east of LA. My stepson is off to Western Massachusetts, Amherst College,
very nice.
Small liberal arts college there. Last one is a senior in high school this fall. So again, coming in, and my wife is an academic too, so it's not really an option for them. Are they going to go to college? It's more which one, and we joke, it's where can we go visit that's worth going to see. But no, ultimately, the other challenge I think any parent has when you've got children ready is that you've got to realize they're the ones that are going to go. So you have to give them some level of input into the decision, and when you're sending them off, I mean, realize that it's their, it's their life now.
And it's different and it's changing.
Yes.
What did I read recently? There are those who feel that Stanford has become the Harvard that Harvard was supposed to be. And there are some schools, as I mentioned earlier, that are in economic trouble. And the student loans are eating some people for life because they're non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. And so it's all changing. The course offerings, the way you go through your daily life, the fact that you spend a semester or two overseas, all this is an experience that we never had back when.
Yeah, no, it's a
and
changing world.
I wanted, for my last question, Carlos, is how do you think it will change going forward? You're kind of you're the nurse taking it forward. You're the midwife giving birth to the new generation. So what's it like?
What is it like? Or if I had to fast forward, like what is it going to be like for their children? I mean, it's a tough thought. I mean, I remember as a young kid, I thought by now we'd all be in those like the Jetsons, these space little capsules going around, and hasn't happened. So on one level, and maybe it's also as a political scientist of international relations, there's so much continuity. There are certain things that do change, and we have to understand them, but there's a lot of enduring kind of things that are similar. So part of me wants to say it's going to be similar. It'll be, a world in which, yes, technologies and transportation is going to continue to be easing. Maybe I would say that it's a foregone conclusion that we're going to be interdependent, and it's just more, are you going to be one of those that's on board and part of it? But having said that, I mean, not everybody is going to be doing that, crossing borders on massive levels. So while you may not do that, the world is coming to you, whether it's in your food or your film or
it's an open world.
Your
now.
world,
No
your
borders.
workplace. So that one way or another, whatever you're doing in life, you've got to come to terms with this globally interdependent world we're a part of, and like it or not, and this notion of globalization, it's a mixed bag. A lot of it's very positive and exciting, but guess what? There are also some real challenges and negative issues. There's a lot of pushback. We see the world now more instantly, and whether it's giving us information. Oh, I heard this morning, this crazy group in Nigeria has killed so many people. Well, guess what? They've probably been doing that for a long time. It's just now that we're learning about it instantly. So you have to understand how to put it in the right context. And looking to the future, well, I'm the eternal optimist. I want to say it's going to be an exciting world. There are real challenges. And while, yes, our children are going to be inheriting some of our mess, they're also going to be solving problems in more creative ways. And that's encouraging.
And saving us in our old age.
Yes. I hope so. And I've got 4 boys, so hopefully they will be able to make the world a little better and comfortable for us as we get into our final years.
I'm counting on them, Carlos.
Yes, I hope so.
That's Carlos Juarez. He's a professor of political science at HBU, specializing in international relations and comparative politics. His regional expertise is primarily in Latin America, Central and Eastern Europe. He has his PhD from UCLA, been a Fulbright to Mexico and the Czech Republic, and just got another one to Innsbruck, Austria, and he is not, repeat, not going into the Foreign Service just yet.
No. I'm happy. I'm okay. I'm helping train the next generation. That's exciting to see happen.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Well,
great.
thank you so much, Jay, and I've been delighted to join you on this and look forward to continue our conversations. Indeed, as I'm off shortly to Europe, I'll find a way to reconnect with you.
Please.
Maybe we'll do another one of these from a distance.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Well.